We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast. This is Abe, your host. I'm flying solo today. Sammy's at work. I just got off work. Figured I got a little bit of energy in me. I wanted to make a podcast today. So I had this epiphany, this idea last night. If you haven't listened to the last podcast yesterday, I don't know. I feel like it went really well. I feel like, I don't know. Just me and Sammy were bouncing off each other really good. And she had a really good time. And that's what I wanted her to know. And I wanted you guys as the fans to know. We just got to get our groove, going. Our feel for it. And I just feel like we worked really well off of each other yesterday. I had this idea, though, driving to work yesterday, because, man, we wanted to jump down probably about 3 or 4 rabbit holes, conspiracy-wise, yesterday. That podcast that was an hour long could have been probably about 3 hours long. The only reason it wasn't was because I had to go to work. But on the way to work, I was just listening to some music and stuff and chilling, just mentally prepping for work. And I just had this idea. I was like, man, I need to come up with like an emblem, and I've been like creating a card game. And I've made a video on it on the actual main YouTube channel. But I was like, man, I should do like I like little cartoons, like little silly cartoons, kind of like if anyone's ever watched Courage the Cowardly Dog, like that style of cartoon I really like. And I've always kind of drawn in that style. Obviously not as good, but I've always been like, man, that would be really cool to kind of like do artwork for each episode. I was slightly inspired by Strange Familiars, which is another podcast, so a shout out to you all. But he does the artwork for every one of his episodes, and I was like, man, that's kind of cool to like sit down and to like paint something or draw something. Now, am I going to sit there and make a portrait for every single episode? No. But I did think like maybe like a cartoon or a doodle for each episode would be kind of cool. For the theme of it. Like I'm going to do a doodle for the title of this episode. But I'm going to do it just honestly just a theme of Conspiracy Corner Podcast. But I thought it would be kind of cool to come up with like almost like a gimmick. Because my spirit animal is a rabbit. And my wife's spirit animal is a deer. So I thought it would be kind of cool. Because she's a big fan of like Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes and anime. I'm a big fan of cartoons and comic books and all that. So I grew up on that type of stuff. And I thought it would be really cool to to use our spirit animals as ourselves as like characters for the artwork for the podcast. So like say we're doing an episode on Sasquatch, an example. I might do a drawing of me like a rabbit samurai rescuing her from a Sasquatch or something. I don't know, just some weird, cool, artistic doodles like that. Some like just raw, sketchy looking cartoons, with some humor to it, because I want this to be. I want to have fun with this, and I want this to be fun in general. I don't want this to be a serious podcast. There will be those times when it is serious, like I did an episode on Beaumont Inn, and I don't know, I got to talking about some serious stuff about, a friend who had passed and stuff, and it started going in that direction, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I want to have fun doing this, and I do have fun doing this. I don't want you guys thinking that I do not have fun doing this. This is my dream. I have been lucky to have been born in this day and age to where I can put out a podcast, and all these people besides me are putting out podcasts also, and I don't think they realize how lucky they are, because back in the day, heck, even when I was a kid, you had like William Cooper and Alex Jones. That was it. Putting out this type of stuff. Or Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM. It was radio waves, man. You had to be doing this type of stuff on radio waves. You had to get lucky enough to be on the radio to have conspiracy stuff. Or you were doing some pirate radio like William Cooper, So I don't think we realize how lucky we are to have this internet to fight the elite, to fight the Illuminati, to raise our voices, to talk about whatever we want to talk about. If we want to talk about conspiracies, if we want to, it gave us a voice that we didn't truly have before. But that's all I wanted to say to you guys. I have nothing else to say as far as like a personal update, except for I had a really good night at work. I have a buddy who's kind of going down a dark path. And as a friend of Bill, I'd like to assist him. I'm 7 months sober, I think. My last chip I received was 6 months. But I don't know if I should step in and be a sponsor for him or not. Me and him have gotten really attached. But I don't know. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of saying this on this podcast right now at this time, but it's just because we're in the corona epidemic, and I haven't been to a meeting in months because they shut everything down. So sorry if that kind of leaked through into this world, But I'll step off that subject. I'm going to do a UFO account first, and then I'll probably get into some ghost stuff. Like I said, I got a lot of backlog stuff. I might actually do like maybe 2 UFO accounts. Yeah, I'll do 2 UFO accounts first, and then a ghost paranormal account if we got time. I don't know. Depends on how much I'm discussing, 18-year-old Greg Faltersack of Waukesha, Wisconsin, encountered something that shook him up considerably when he returned home between 2 to 2:30 a.m. on August 21st from his girlfriend's house. His 1963 Plymouth suffered a complete electrical failure. The engine died and the radiator boiled over. Faltersack slammed on the brakes, brought the car to a halt, and saw a large circular orange object that appeared to hover just over the treetops. The frightened young man estimated that the object was 20 to 30 feet in diameter. He said he had it in sight for several seconds when the object made a beeping sound and rose out of sight. Faltersack managed to restart his car and drive home, but the lights, horn, and radio would not work. It was later discovered that the fuses had blown. Police investigating the report were unable to substantiate Faltersack's claims. Mrs. Patricia Blake of Waukesha, on learning of the incident, reported that she had had the same kind of experience in 1966. She had seen a similar orange ball in the sky at the same location. The Blakes had stopped their car to watch the aerial phenomenon, then had trouble getting their car started again. The Stevens Point Journal documented a UFO sighting over Plover, Wisconsin on Tuesday, August 21st at 8:45 p.m. This report originated from pilot Jack West, who had been with his sister Cheryl and her 3-year-old son. My sister saw it on her way home from work. I saw it hovering low for a while over Highway 51 Beltline. It looked red on the outside and white toward the center. At a greater distance, it was an amber color. At first I thought it was an airplane, but the object was hovering soundlessly and making strange motions. I could tell from the way it was moving that it wasn't an airplane. It started making sharp turns and then shot straight up in the air. Then it made an oval around Plover before heading west toward Wood County. When it began moving west, it took off like a bat. It really went. A series of UFO reports came in from the southern Ontario communities of Bradford, Galt, Waterdown, Guelph in the early part of August, with a multitude of witnesses making public their experiences to the press. 4 teenagers had been playing street games at 10:15 p.m. when they glanced up to see an airborne object flash across the sky. The boys described what they saw as being a disc-shaped with 2 lights on the side, one green and one red. There appeared to be some kind of hazy ring around the object, which was in the view for about 15 seconds. That's odd. Moving from south to north over Galt, the 4 boys were separated and asked to draw the object from memory. 3 of the drawings were almost identical. The 4th was similar. So that's pretty good evidence right there. Right after the incident, the 4 were separated and told to draw. 3 of them were identical, and the 4th was similar, you know. Other witnesses from the area where the rash of UFO sightings had been reported gave descriptions that matched the Galt sighting. Other witnesses said the object appeared to change shape. It seemed to be disc-shaped, but then gave the appearance of being shaped like an arrow with flashing red and green lights. So that's crazy. I don't know. I've never heard of one shaped like an arrow. Yeah, that's wild. But how is everyone else doing? I always like to give my update, you know, when I do a podcast and, you know, the opening of the episode. But I truly do like to hear from you guys, you know, how you guys are doing, what's going on in you guys' life, you know. Some of you guys have given me great info and stuff, stuff like that, you know. Would you guys like to see more of my artwork and stuff? Let me know in the comments. I even thought about, for people who subscribe, sending my artwork signed and stuff by me and my wife, and you can have it for free. We could just send it to you through a letter, in the mail, an envelope, and there you go. Free signed, autographed artwork that we use for the channel. Free. No charge whatsoever, We're just trying to spread the word out and get the truth out there. Me and Sam, we're a tag team. That's my wife, but I don't know. I got really lucky, man. I got really fucking lucky. Pardon my French, but that's my best friend too, man. And that's super fucking rare in this world we live in, to have a wife who I got lucky enough to be my best friend. I mean, she's my wife first and foremost, But I was married before her, and I got lucky this time because my first wife was not my friend. I could not hang out with my first wife and be friends with her. I just was not on that friend level. And so for me and her to be like friends, and husband and wife, I don't know, it's wild, and we dated first. I didn't get friend zoned or anything and then pulled into it. I just asked her out on a date, we went out. We went out on, I think about probably 2 or 3 dates, and then I said, do you want to go steady? Do you want to be like my girlfriend, And we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and I don't think we even got married and stuff, and we didn't even get to the whole best friend level until after we were married for a while. Probably about after the first year of marriage, we finally connected as best friends, to where, I don't know, it's hard to describe. I can't describe it to you all unless anyone who's listening to this has ever felt that before. So I don't know, to me it's kind of like a project of love. I'm thinking about doing a bunch of different cartooning and stuff and giving it to you guys, or just to spread the word, is almost kind of like punk rock flyers like we used to do back in the day. I don't know if anyone listening used to be a punk. I was big in the punk era in Florida, the last of the punks, a 90s kid, But let me know in the comments, if you guys want some signed artwork that we use for the show, I'll send it to you for free. You can have it, or frame it, whatever. Do whatever you want with it. Just spread the word for us, But I got a ghost account here. It's called The Dreaded Meeting. It's White Oaks, Charlotte, North Carolina. It is hard to live a quarter of a century in a city the size of Charlotte, North Carolina, and not hear some fascinating ghost stories. But when that city is home, you know its family connections, and you are aware that others do too. Will they recognize someone or even themselves? And how much embarrassment will a story cause? Keeping to the facts, but with some disguising of names, we will take the risk and relate a story for those interested in the supernatural. Since I was a confidante of the woman in the story, I was able to keep up with the events. She was a writer, and her occupation caused her to meet many well-to-do charlatans. But it would be far better if I were to let the young woman, whom we will call Karen, tell the experience in her own words. I had an assignment to do a story on a historic house called White Oaks. My interview was set for late in the afternoon, and the hostess had told me that there would be a party going on for a performing arts group. Your presence won't be any inconvenience at all, Karen. In fact, why not plan to just be one of my guests and enjoy yourself? She suggested graciously. When a story subject had to cancel, I decided to go home early and change from a tailored suit into a new red cocktail dress. That was infinitely more flattering. I remember thinking how foolish it was, but something overruled my unusual practicality, and as I drove down Providence Road in all my finery, I was excited about the evening ahead. When I first saw the Colonial Mansion, I thought the Scarlett O'Hara would certainly have felt at home here. Once owned by the late James Buchanan Duke, the stately 65-year-old house in the heart of Charlotte's Eastover section stands almost as tall as the branches of the towering trees that surround it. White Oaks, as it is called, was part of that grand scale of living to which Duke, a tobacco king, was accustomed. I knocked, thinking the butler would answer. The door opened almost immediately, and there stood not the butler, but the most handsome man I have ever seen. He had dark curly hair with a distinguished hint of gray, expressive blue-green eyes, and a dazzling smile. In a charming and amusing fashion he pretended to be the butler. We were both laughing as we walked together down the white and black marble entrance hall. He introduced me to a group of other guests who stood chattering and sampling hors d'oeuvres at one end of an elegant room the size of a ballroom. My impromptu escort was obviously the center of the women's attention, and he had no sooner introduced himself to me as John than two plump ladies that came up and, with an arm through each of his, carried him off. He appeared to be drifting away on a pair of water wings that looked back as if reluctant to go. "Oh, here you are," said my hostess, appearing at my elbow. "Everyone seems to be entertaining themselves. This is a good time to take you on a tour of the house. It has changed considerably since Natalie Duke lived here, but I doubt if she would mind the changes we've made." "Oh, do the Dukes live here long?" I asked. "Only about 6 years, and Natalie far less than her husband or daughter. She made no bones about finding Charlotte dull, and when they visited here, she usually left before the rest of her family." I gazed admiringly at the hand-carved marble fireplace at one end of the room. The gold leaf in this room was lovely. "That was applied by the Dukes. We used masking tape to protect it while we were repainting," my hostess commented. A round oak table looked almost lost in the oversized kitchen, and along one side wall was an immense hooded gas range that had been used by the servants of former families. There were beautiful classical mantels, marble hearths, and tiles around the fireplace. Bathroom fixtures were early ceramic castings, and there were elaborately detailed brass fixtures. Some of the lighting resembled colonial candles or oil lamps, and the dining room was one of the most magnificent crystal chandeliers I'd ever seen. My hostess suddenly turned and asked, "Have you and John Avery known each other long?" "I met him tonight. Why do you ask?" "It's just that he's married. His wife has been in a sanatorium for the past 3 years." "I'm sorry to hear that. But really, that is the first conversation I have ever had with him, and I probably will be the last." As if to make out a liar, there was a masculine voice at my elbow, and it was John's. "I brought you some champagne, caviar, and a sandwich. I hope this will lure you into talking with me, Karen." "How can I resist this thoughtfulness?" I asked, genuinely hungry. What possible harm could there be in spending a few minutes with this man? For the first time, I noticed that he had a slight limp. Someone nearby was talking about track, I believe. At any rate, we both heard the conversation, and he turned to me saying, "I'm sure you've noticed my limp. It's the result of polio when I was a child. I used to resent the fact that I came along before Dr. Salk and his sugar cubes with vaccine in them. Big Pharma! Sorry." "You met me at the door and escorted me in, and I certainly wasn't aware of it then," I said, which was true. This seemed to please him greatly, and he went on to tell me that through hours of exercise he had become able to play volleyball in college, and since then he had walked at least 3 miles a day. When we went on to talk of current events and his hobby of photography, thinking it over, I could not deny that I was fond of this man. He had a charming smile. I had enjoyed our talk very much, but figured that was where it ended. The next day was Friday, and I picked up the phone at my office to hear John Avery's voice asking if I would join him for dinner. I had plans for the evening, and a new executive who had come to the paper from another city. We had lunched together several times. Sorry. And it was just a friendship. I could have changed our dinner to another night, but I could not forget my hostess' warning. I was polite, but my voice held John at arm's length as I told him I had other plans that should be it. Less than a week had passed when I was surprised by a call from White Oaks with an invitation to return. My hostess was having a few people over for drinks, and among them were a couple who had once lived in the house. If I had not finished my story, she wondered would I care to talk to them. Sorry. Of course I accepted. When we had been seated on the brick terrace at White Oaks for less than an hour when the doorbell rang. In a few minutes I heard the faint sound of the terrace of someone walking with a limp. For some insane reason, I could feel my heart thud. Of course it was John, and I felt that he was surprised to see me as I was to see him. How beautiful it was that afternoon, with the blooms of dogwoods, cherry trees, and azaleas. The other guests went off to tour the house, and John suggested that I might like to go out and look at the gardens and fountains. Buck Duke had done everything well, and there was nothing like it anywhere in Charlotte. How long we stood talking on the edge of a circular garden near the fountains, I have no idea. But I know when we rejoined the others, and my hostess looked at me, I felt some guilt and embarrassment. Something happened that evening between John and me, and during the coming months, it seemed to block my fear of consequences and normal feelings of guilt. When I considered the future, it was with all sorts of romantic imaginings. His wife would probably not live long, and he was aware of it. Or he would divorce her, and we would move to another city after setting up a generous trust for her lifetime care. All obstacles would somehow miraculously disappear, melted by the fervency of our love for each other. But in August I began to realize that John's sense of responsibility would never allow him to divorce his wife, and anything other than marriage would be impossible for me. More and more I began to feel sorry for this woman I had never met, when the answer to this painful situation, the only right decision was to end my doomed romance. One night, as I left Queens Road and turned down Ardsley, I knew I must not weaken. John had arrived first. There was a large party going on at White Oaks, and just as we had on that fateful evening in the early spring, we walked again in the gardens. Everything about John's manner, the tension, the pleading expression in his eyes told me that he sensed what I planned to tell him. Afterward, we were both in agony and stood silently together near a fountain. What could be said to assuage, I guess is how you pronounce that? A-S-S-U-A-G-E? Assuage? Such hurt? Never heard that word before. I must go now, I really must. I looked at my watch. It was midnight. Karen, do just one thing for me, please. It is all that I shall ever ask of you on this earth. What is it? I will agree to all you have said. Just promise to meet me here 1 year from midnight at the same hour. I was reluctant at first, thinking how difficult it would be to see him and how bad it would be for both of us, as it would only reopen partly healed wounds. But at last I consented. Well, I'll come if I'm alive, I said, with an attempt at lightness. John grasped me by the wrist. Don't say that, Karen. Say dead or alive. All right, then. We will meet, dead or alive. Thus we parted. The next year, I was on the same spot a few minutes before the appointed time, and John arrived punctually at midnight. I had begun to regret the arrangement I had made, but it was a promise. Although I kept this appointment, I said that I really did not wish to do so again. John, however, persuaded me to renew it for just 1 more year, and I consented, much against my better judgment. We again said our goodbyes, repeating the promise, dead or alive. I had begun to see a delightful man, and late the following spring we became engaged. The summer was spent boating on Lake Norman, with occasional trips to visit Alex's family in the North Carolina mountains at Montreat. They were prominent Presbyterians. His father, you know what? I really don't know much about Presbyterians. So if you are a fan or someone coming across this video, tell me what the heck Presbyterians believe. Or if you just know in general, comment, please. Because I really do not know what Presbyterians believe. Sorry. I would say that's off subject, but it's not. That's honestly what's on subject. We were planning a September wedding and a honeymoon that would begin on Labor Day weekend. By early July, I had begun to think more and more about my promise to John. The last thing I wanted to do was to meet him in the gardens again. The days sped past with terrible swiftness, and the thought of that meeting hung over me like a dark cloud. I didn't want to go, but I had promised. I suppose that the only thing that could get me out of this was death. Not even that, really, for I had promised to go dead or alive. Dead or alive! What a macabre promise to ask of me. I knew very well that Alex wouldn't like me meeting another man in a secluded place at midnight. Should I talk to him with the hope he would understand? Was he likely to understand me once of having dated a married man, even one married to an invalid in a sanatorium? Guilt overwhelmed me. As the last Monday night in July approached, I became more and more apprehensive. If I were to find out about Alex meeting a woman under peculiar circumstances a short time before our marriage, I would consider calling off the wedding. Would he feel that way if he found out? Finally, I decided I would confide in my long-standing friend, an apartment mate, and ask her to accompany me. Sherry said she would go to be sure I was all right. That night we arrived at the gardens about 10 minutes before 12. I decided I would leave, having kept my promise. If John were not there by midnight, the area near the brick terrace was empty, and I did not see a soul. But at 5 minutes before 12, I heard a slight noise. It came again. Finally, ever so softly, it was occurring at regular intervals. It was the sound of footsteps on the brick terrace, but they were slower than normal, and it had just the slightest dragging sibilance. It is he, I thought, for I had heard that the walk too often to mistaken it. Tonight he was right on time. I knew that what I must tell him about my approaching marriage would hurt. even though he had surely resigned himself to end our romance. The footsteps here became closer. Soon I would have to break the news about Alex. Sherry was at discreet distance, but close enough to see me. I stood by the fountain in the brilliant moonlight. On came the footsteps. Why so slow? I was not only ashamed to be there, but was growing increasingly angry that I had allowed myself to be persuaded to come a second time. This would be our last meeting, and I would not stay long. I could see John now, and I watched him make his way into the moonlight at the end of the terrace. On he came, past a large azalea bush, and along the drive. It would all be over soon, thank heaven. When he was close enough for me to see him more clearly, I noticed that he was dressed in dark formal attire. He must be doing this for effect, I reasoned, for he knew how handsome I had always thought him in his black coat. Oddly enough, he seemed about to pass me, and involuntarily I reached out my arm with an affectionate gesture to stop him. I was astounded when he walked right through it, and I could feel nothing as he walked over me. I distinctly saw his lips move, forming the words, "Dead or alive." I even heard him say them, not with my ears, but with some other sense. It's called a sixth sense, girl. What sense I do not know, but the words were spoken as clearly as if they had ever been in a normal voice. I felt my blood turn to ice. Hurrying over to where I knew Sherry was standing, I asked Sherry, "Who passed you?" "Let's go. I don't want to talk about it." "Sherry, you know I was coming to meet, and he had to pass you. You didn't mean you didn't see him?" "I heard him coming. I'd know that walk of his anywhere. And he went right by me, only a short distance away. But Karen, there was something wrong, something so strange about him that it scared me to death. Then I saw him stand in front of you. What did he say?" "Let's leave. We can talk at home." And talk we did, for half the night until finally we went to bed. The next day I phoned a relative of John's on some pretext. I had not spoken to her in months, but almost immediately the conversation turned to John. "You knew he had died, didn't you, Karen?" "No, I've been out of town." "It happened last Friday when he was in South Carolina, and we buried him Sunday in the family plot. He had suddenly become ill, and actually was quite delirious toward the end. For the last hour before he died, he kept saying over and over, 'Dead or alive, will I get there?' I wish I could say he had a peaceful death, but poor John must have had something terrible to fear about before reaching hereafter none of us has ever suspected. How I wish I had known it, so I could have led him to the Lord." I hung up the phone in a state of shock. John had been true to his promise to meet me. He had come from even beyond the grave. Ha ha! Well, I know what this podcast is going to be named, Dead or Alive. White Oaks, this is the info if you actually want to go there and visit it, because I always try to encourage ghost hunting, unlike most ghost hunting channels and podcasts and stuff, that everyone's always like, "Don't do this at home," and it's like, how did you become a professional ghost hunter? "Well, I started out when I was a kid and had a video camera," and, "Oh, so you're doing exactly what we want to do, but you're telling us not to do that." So, if you want to ghost hunt this place, it's White Oaks at 400 Hermitage Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. Was built by James Buchanan Duke and is also known as the Duke Mansion. The elegant house is now Linwood Foundation Conference Center. For information, you can call 704-375-4400. But I don't know, if you listen to the last podcast, it's kind of a continuation onto this one. Me and Sam were talking about basically how on the last one, it was a love story between a residual spirit And this one's a love story with an intelligent spirit, with an oath, you know. Makes you kind of wonder, do oaths go on even into the afterlife?
We are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.